Gardens, aka O Block, was sold last year. And now it seems like the building may be getting torn down. Let's take a look at what's happening. According to reports, the Parkway Gardens houses, known to rap fans everywhere as O Block, has officially sold.
O Block, Parkway Gardens, 64th and Cottage Grove, one of the most legendary blocks in the entire United States, are under attack. The mayor of Chicago just made a move to tear it down. And the people of O Block, they are protesting in the streets. Tensions are rising, and word spreading through the city right now is that before this is over, things could turn deadly. This is O Block members' protest after the mayor tries to tear down O Block. Let's get into it. Parkway Gardens, what the streets call O Block, sits in the Woodlawn neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. The development was built in the 1950s, fam. You heard me. This ain't some new construction that popped up last decade. These buildings have been standing for over 70 years. When it was first built, Parkway Gardens was actually supposed to be a solution. Chicago was dealing with severe overcrowding in its black communities. Communities that had been systematically pushed into certain neighborhoods through redlining, discriminatory housing policies, and racist real estate practices. The city said, "We'll build public housing. We'll give people somewhere to live." And on paper, that sounded like progress. But here's the real tea. The city built these developments, packed them full of black families, and then left them. Underfunded the schools, ignored the infrastructure, cut off economic investment, let the jobs dry up. Generation after generation grew up in concentrated poverty with no real way out. And then the same system that created those conditions turned around and blamed the people living there for what happened next. That's the context. That's the foundation. Keep that in your mind as we move forward because it matters. Now, O Block specifically, the name O Block didn't come from nowhere. It's named after O.D. Perry, a young man from the neighborhood who was killed in 2011. He was 20 years old. And when he died, the block he lived on, the block that loved him, took his name. That's how deep the community ties run in this place. They don't just name streets after politicians. They carry their fallen with them everywhere they go. And let me tell you something. O Block produced some of the most culturally significant people in American history. No cap. Not just rap music. American history. You want to talk about famous people from O Block? Buckle up, gang, because this list is going to shock some of you. Let's start with the one that most people know. Chief Keef Sosa. The man who single-handedly changed the entire sonic landscape of hip-hop. Before Drake was singing over trap beats, before the whole country was locked into that 808 drum pattern and melodic drill sound, Chief Keef was doing it from O Block at 16 years old. I Don't Like wasn't just a song. It was a cultural earthquake. It launched a whole genre. Drill music. The music that now influences everything from London to Brooklyn to Lagos started right there on 64th and Cottage Grove. Think about that. One housing complex in Chicago's South Side gave the entire world a new musical genre. That's not nothing. That's legacy. But that's just the beginning though. Lil Durk, one of the biggest names in rap today, period. The man has chart-topping albums, co-signs from the biggest artists alive, and a business empire. He came up in that same environment, connected to those same streets, shaped by that same community. G Herbo, Lil Herb, another artist whose raw, unflinching storytelling about Southside Chicago life hit the culture like a freight train. His debut mixtape, Welcome to Fazoland, is considered a classic. He wasn't rapping about a fictional place. He was documenting real life. But here's where it gets crazy for people who think O Block is just a rap thing. Michelle Obama. Yes, the Michelle Obama, former First Lady of the United States, the woman who stood in the White House and gave some of the most powerful speeches in modern American political history. She grew up on the South Side of Chicago. Her family's roots, her community ties, her entire foundation as a human being. It was forged in the same neighborhoods, the same culture, the same world that produced O Block. When you understand that, you understand why tearing down these buildings isn't just a real estate decision. You're talking about erasing the physical DNA of a community that gave America some of its greatest cultural exports. You're talking about bulldozing the birthplace of an art form. You're talking about displacing people whose families have been on those blocks for decades. And the city wants to act like it's just about housing conditions. Nah, fam, nah. But here's what you need to understand. O Block is not the first. Not even close. Chicago has a long documented ugly history of tearing down predominantly black housing developments and displacing the communities that live there. And every single time the city used the same playbook. They say the buildings are deteriorating. They say it's for the residents' benefit. They bring in developers with money and connections. And then the community that built those blocks gets scattered to the wind. Remember Cabrini Green? One of the most iconic housing projects in American history. Literally featured in movies, documentaries, news segments for decades. The city demolished it completely. And what's there now? Luxury condos, Whole Foods, restaurants with $18 cocktails. The black families who lived there for generations dispersed. Their community gone. The same thing happened with the Robert Taylor homes. The largest public housing development in the United States when it was built. Miles of high-rise buildings along the Dan Ryan Expressway. Demolished, community destroyed. And each time the city does this, they make the same promises. We'll give you vouchers. We'll help you find housing. The new development will include affordable units. And each time those promises evaporate. People end up in neighborhoods they don't know, separated from their families and support networks, dealing with trauma and displacement that never gets addressed. This ain't a theory. This is documented history. The University of Chicago, which by the way is literally in the Woodlawn neighborhood right next to a block, has published research on this. The displacement of public housing residents in Chicago is one of the most studied urban policy failures in American academic literature. So when people in O Block hear the city talking about demolition plans and development opportunities, they've seen this movie before and they know how it ends. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. And this is the part the mainstream media glossed over completely. In April 2021, a real estate and development company called Related Midwest, the firm that owns Parkway Gardens, put the property up for sale. Just like that, one of Chicago's most populated and historically significant housing developments, put on the market like it was a condo flip. And here's what they were selling it as. Fam, listen to this. The biggest marketing feature they advertised to potential buyers was a federal housing contract that would guarantee subsidized rent for years to come. They were literally using the Residence Section 8 contracts as a selling point. Buy this property. The government will keep paying the rent for these low-income residents for years. That's how they pitched it. The people who live there weren't the priority. The guaranteed federal income stream was. But then, and this is the part that made heads turn, they took it off the market in June 2021. Said they were going to keep working with HUD and the city to ensure residents have quality, affordable housing. Why the sudden change of heart? Why put it up for sale and then pull it back 2 months later? Some observers, and these are real observers, not conspiracy theorists, pointed to what Related Midwest had going on at City Hall at the exact same time. Specifically, a massive downtown Chicago development called the 78, a project so big, so expensive, so politically connected that it was in line for, get this, a $1 billion subsidy from tax increment financing, TIF money, city money, public money. And the 78 was also one of the frontrunners to host a new Chicago casino. So, let's connect the dots here, gang. Related Midwest owns O Block. Related Midwest is also trying to get $1 billion in city subsidies for their downtown luxury project. Some people believe they were trying to offload Parkway Gardens specifically so they could focus all their political capital and resources on getting the downtown deal approved. In other words, the people of O Block may have been expendable, a liability to be shed so the same company could chase bigger money downtown. Real recognized real, and what this looks like is a company choosing downtown luxury development over a South Side community. And when the heat came down, they backed off temporarily because here's the thing, the sale listing got pulled, but the underlying pressure on Parkway Gardens, it never went away. Now, fast forward to today. And this is where it gets real uncomfortable. Chicago city government has been under enormous pressure to address the state of Parkway Gardens for years. Residents have complained about mold, pest infestations, broken elevators, inadequate heating. These are legitimate issues, real problems that real people are living with every day. But here's the thing about those problems. They didn't appear out of nowhere. These buildings have been chronically underfunded and undermanaged for decades. The ownership has changed hands. Federal housing dollars have been mismanaged. And the residents, the actual people who live there, have been raising these concerns for years with basically zero response. So now when there's a potential development windfall on the line, suddenly city officials are very concerned about conditions at Parkway Gardens. Suddenly there are inspections. Suddenly there are reports. Suddenly demolition is being discussed as if it's the only option. But the residents aren't buying it. And neither are the community leaders. Because here's the question that nobody in city government wants to answer directly. If you tear down these buildings, where do the people go? There are hundreds of families in Parkway Gardens. People who have lived there for 20, 30, some of them 40 years. Their entire social infrastructure is in that community. Their churches, their corner stores, their schools, their block associations, the informal networks of mutual aid and support that low-income communities build because the formal systems failed them. All of that is rooted in that physical space. You tear down the buildings. You don't just move people. You destroy a community. Full stop. And now we're at where things stand today. And I need y'all to understand the temperature on the ground right now because it is hot. Residents of O Block and community advocates have been organizing. Protests have been breaking out in Woodlawn. People are showing up at city council meetings. Community leaders are going on record putting their names out there saying publicly that they will not accept displacement without a fight. And it's not just the residents. People who grew up in that community, people who left and went on to build careers and platforms are speaking up. Artists, activists, people with reach and influence are amplifying what's happening because when you have a neighborhood with that kind of cultural gravity, that kind of hip-hop lineage, that kind of historical significance, people pay attention. But here's where it gets crazy, and I need to be real with y'all about this part. When you have a community that has been ignored, underfunded, disrespected, and threatened with displacement, a community that has also dealt with years of violence, poverty, and systemic abandonment. The protests aren't just peaceful marches with signs and chants. The anger runs deep, multiple generations deep. Older community members who remember Cababrini Green being torn down. Parents who watch the promises made to displaced families never materialize. Young people who feel like they have nothing to lose because the system has never given them anything to protect in the first place. Sources close to the situation are saying that if the city moves forward with any kind of forced demolition or relocation plan without real community input and real guarantees, the response from the community could turn volatile. This ain't a threat. This is reading the room. This is understanding what happens when people who have been pushed to the edge get pushed one more time. No cap. The city needs to understand what they're dealing with here. O Block isn't just a zip code. It's a symbol. And symbols, when threatened, become rallying points. Now, here's where people started connecting the dots. Because when you look at Woodlawn, the entire neighborhood, not just Parkway Gardens, you see what's happening in slow motion. The University of Chicago has been expanding in that area. There's new development pressure coming from multiple directions. Property values in adjacent South Side neighborhoods have been shifting as gentrification creeps further and further from downtown. And Woodlawn has something that developers desperately want. Land, space, proximity to transit, proximity to the University of Chicago, proximity to Jackson Park, where the Obama Presidential Center is being built, which by the way is expected to dramatically increase property values in the surrounding area. Are you starting to see the picture? The Obama Presidential Center in Jackson Park, right next to Woodlawn, right next to O Block. When that center opens, this neighborhood is going to be on the map in a completely different way. Property values are going up, developer interest is surging, and in that context, a large parcel of land in Woodlawn, currently occupied by low-income public housing residents, becomes very attractive to a certain type of investor. This is how it always works. Community stays struggling for decades. Nobody cares. Then something changes the value equation. A stadium, a university expansion, a presidential library, and suddenly everyone is very concerned about the conditions in the neighborhood. And the solution is always mysteriously to move the poor people somewhere else. The street's been talking about this for months, and the math ain't matting in favor of the residents. So where does this leave us right now? Related Midwest still owns the property. The city is still applying pressure. The residents are still organizing, and the tension between the community and City Hall is at a level that nobody can pretend is going away. Community organizations have been demanding 3 specific things: transparent community meetings with binding commitments, a moratorium on any demolition or displacement until a true community-led plan is developed, and a guarantee that any development of the property includes permanent affordable housing for current residents. Not vouchers that get you scattered across the city, but actual units in whatever new structure gets built at the same location. Those are not radical demands. Those are reasonable asks from people who have been burned before. But the city, the developers, they want to move on their timeline. They want to control the process, and they're finding that the community of O Block, the same community that raised Chief Keef, that produced drill music that has been written off and dismissed for decades, is not going down without a serious fight. What happened next, after the initial protest actions, shocked some political observers who didn't think this neighborhood had the organizational capacity to push back. But they clearly didn't know their history, because their community has been organizing through adversity for generations. The infrastructure for resistance was already there. It just needed an activation point, and the mayor's demolition plans gave them one. Let me zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about one housing development in one Chicago neighborhood. What's happening at O Block is a story that's playing out in cities all across America. Houston, Atlanta, Detroit, Baltimore, Oakland, New York. The same pattern. Black community gets built over generations in a specific place. That place gets labeled dangerous, deteriorated, problematic. Then economic interests converge on that location. And suddenly the solution to all the problems is to move the people who actually built that community out. Replace them with something more profitable and call it urban renewal or development or revitalization. But real recognize real. There is nothing being revitalized for the people who are already there. It's a ratio with better PR. And here's why the music connection matters, fam. Here's why. It's not just symbolic. Drill music, the genre that came out of O Block, out of these specific blocks, these specific experiences, this specific culture has generated billions of dollars, billions. Chicago drill became international. It's in commercials. It's in movies. It's on every major streaming platform. It's influenced fashion, slang, entire aesthetic movements across the globe. That cultural product came from a community that the city of Chicago is now trying to demolish. The same city that benefits from Chicago's cultural reputation. The same city that promotes Chicago as a music capital is moving to eliminate the conditions that made that music possible. You cannot separate the art from the community that made it. You cannot celebrate Chief Keef's legacy while bulldozing his block. That's not how cultural respect works. That's not how humanity works. And Michelle Obama's connection to the South Side world isn't incidental either. She has spoken extensively about how her Chicago upbringing shaped her values, her worldview, her sense of community obligation. If you believe in what she represents, the idea that kids from tough neighborhoods can go on to change the world, then you have to also believe in protecting the neighborhoods that produce those kids. You can't have one without the other. So, here's where we land, gang. Keep it 100. The city of Chicago is trying to tear down O Block. The developer that owns Parkway Gardens already tried to sell it once and backed down under pressure. The economic forces pushing toward demolition and redevelopment are real, and they are powerful. And the residents and community members fighting back are doing so against a system that has defeated communities like theirs before. Cabrini Green, Robert Taylor Holmes, and others I didn't even have time to get into today. But this time feels different. And I'm not just saying that. The level of organization, the level of cultural attention, the historical moment with the Obama Center changing the neighborhood's profile. All of these things have created a situation where the city cannot quietly do what it's done before. There are too many eyes on Woodlawn right now. Too many people paying attention. Too many voices with platforms who are not going to let this get swept under the rug. that doesn't mean the community wins. I'm not about to promise you a happy ending because I don't have one to give you. What I can tell you is that this fight is real. The stakes are enormous and the outcome is genuinely uncertain. What happens if the city moves forward with demolition against community wishes? What happens if the protests escalate? What happens if developers with $1 billion in city subsidies at stake start pulling strings at City Hall? That's the question that keeps community leaders up at night. And it should keep all of us paying attention because O-Block isn't just a place on a map. It's proof of what communities can produce when they're left to build their own culture without outside interference. It's the birthplace of a global music movement. It's the neighborhood of future leaders and artists and warriors who haven't even been born yet. And if the city tears it down without a real plan, without real community control, without real guarantees of return and equity for the people who built that place, then what they're really tearing down is the idea that Black communities in America deserve to stay, to grow, to thrive in the places they've called home. This ain't no game. Fam, real recognize real. Stay tuned because this story is not over. Not even close. If you learned something today, drop a comment. If you're from Chicago, from the South Side, from Woodlawn, let me know what you're seeing on the ground. I want to hear from y'all directly. And if you think your city is pulling the same moves on your neighborhood, share this video because awareness is the first step. And right now, O-Block needs all the eyes it can get. We out.